Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
This new year, it's time to do wellness on your terms. That's where Ollie comes in. Thanks to their delightful gummies, you can actually get a good night's sleep. And you might finally stand a chance of staying focused. Because this is the year of you. Discover Ollie vitamins and supplements. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Hello and welcome to Want to Hear Something Weird? A weird podcast about weird stuff hosted by two weird people.
Thank you.
I'm one of your hosts, Tom.
You're not wrong. I'm Laura.
Forgot your name there for a second.
Briefly.
Laura, this is, I think maybe the first time I'm going in like completely dark. I have no idea what you're bringing me today. Like
That's
sometimes we you know, in the beginning we talked a lot about the topics together, just kind of like make sure we were on the same page about things. And I don't know that if I was going to talk about ghosts, you weren't like, no, I'm terrified of ghosts. You can't talk about ghosts. That was one of the big things in the beginning.
That
Make sure we don't
lot, yeah.
terrify each other because we have to sleep with each other. So if somebody's having night terrors, the other person's dealing with that. Yeah. But
yeah,
anyway,
this is really exciting. You have no idea.
No idea.
So we're going to jump right in.
Okay, great.
Not a moment to lose. In October of 1837, a girl by the name of Mary Stevens was walking alone at night in London. She had just left her parents' home and was going to where she worked as a servant.
Okay. 1837?
Okay,
so a long time ago.
Long time ago. Suddenly, a strange figure jumped out from nowhere in the dark. In the dark alley.
No, even worse.
In the dark alley. Grabbed her and began to rip at her clothing with its claws that were, quote...
Its claws?
Mm-hmm. That were, quote, cold and clammy as those of a corpse.
Yee.
She screamed, which made the attacker flee, and neighboring people heard her scream and searched for the creep, but they could not find him.
Okay.
Near Mary's home the very next day, the same creature jumped in front of a carriage that was passing by, which caused the driver to lose control and crash, injuring himself pretty badly.
Okay.
Several witnesses claim that he escaped, the attacker escaped by jumping over a 9-foot high wall while cackling with a high-pitched ringing laughter.
Oh, okay. So this is like early American Ninja Warrior where they do those obstacles. I think those walls are 9 feet.
Yeah, maybe.
They're usually not cackling with a high-pitched laughter, though. And they usually don't do it, like I presume in this case, in just one 9-foot leap.
Yes. So, Tom, this is the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, Spring-Heeled Jack is one of those, I guess it's like a cryptid, kind of?
Yes, ish. We'll get into it.
Or creature paranormal thing that I've heard it a lot. You hear the name Spring-Heeled Jack, you know, in pop culture and things like that. But yeah, I'm not super familiar with it.
Yes. Spring-Heeled Jack is definitely a pretty well-known urban legend.
Urban legend, yeah, that's the word for it.
But a lot of interesting information here.
Okay.
So, yes, Spring-Heeled Jack is a creature that terrorized Victorian England and Scotland for many decades in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
He became extremely popular and widespread at the time because of the many reports of his strange appearance and also his ability to leap very high, hence the name suggesting he has springs in his heels.
Okay.
A few months after this initial incident with Mary Stevens in January of 1838, so the Mary Stevens incident happened in October of 1837.
Okay, so this is 5 months later? No, 3 months later?
About
4
3
months
months.
later? Somewhere around there.
The Lord Mayor of London publicly addressed the case because he had received many, many letters describing the incidents of this creature. Everything from wicked pranks being played on innocent people
So
to
like ring and runs.
ding dong ditch.
Yeah, leaving a bag of flaming dog turds
Yeah.
on the door.
Just things like jumping out and scaring people.
Okay.
Like, you know,
Just
classic.
yeah. He's just doing it for TikTok. He's doing it for clout.
Right. But also it varied between innocent but slightly mean pranks to actual vicious attacks.
Okay. Just
Where-
cold, clammy claws.
Exactly. Where he severely wounded his victims by the
claws?
the claws that he wore on his hands. That's how it was described. That
Oh,
he was
okay.
wearing claws on his hands.
Wearing claws, not that he had claws.
Yes.
Interesting.
Spring Heel Jack seemed to target young women. Many of them were servants. And the mayor said the attacker needed to be caught and punished and instructed the police to search for the individual responsible and offered a reward publicly for his capture.
I wonder if they were mostly servants because that was like who was out at night,
Yeah.
you know, like as far as like vulnerable people to go after.
Right.
You didn't have a proper Victorian English woman walking around alone at night.
Right,
But
they would always
some
have, like,
servant
an
might
escort.
have been told, you know, go empty the bedpans or whatever.
Yeah. Run errands and and things like that.
Go look for the spring-heeled jack.
Yeah. So this is now public information. This everyone kind of is aware
Everybody
of
knows about it.
Spring Heel Jack
Yeah.
and is aware that the police are searching for him.
And there's money leading to
And there's
his
money.
arrest, right?
Yep. So in
Can I ask a question?
of course.
Where does this fall in the timeline of Jack the Ripper?
So Jack the Ripper, I believe, happened in the later half of
Okay. Of the 1800s.
So this was a little bit before that.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of Jacks up to no good in that
So
time.
yeah, keep an eye out for those jacks when you're out at night.
Yeah. So in February of 1938, so this is now a month after the mayor made
His proclamation.
his statements, a teenage girl named Jane Alsop was at home at her father's house when she heard a knock at the door. She opened the door to a man claiming to be a police officer, and he told her to bring a light because, quote, "we have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane."
Okay. But they need her help, the police.
Because it was right outside this house, this police officer went to the door to
Okay.
ask. This is what she's thinking anyway, for a light.
Oh, for light.
Yeah. So she turns back to the back into the house to retrieve a candle and goes outside to bring it to him in the lane. It was then that she noticed that he was wearing a large cloak. She handed him the candle, and he instantly threw off the cloak and revealed a hideous and frightful appearance.
Oh, okay.
His eyes were red balls of fire,
Interesting.
and he vomited blue and white flames from his mouth.
Okay, that's quite a party trick.
She described him as wearing a large helmet, and
All right.
he was also
She didn't notice any of this stuff when he knocked at the door.
unclear.
All right.
That was,
Wearing a large helmet.
contained under the cloak, I guess. He was wearing a large helmet and a very tight fitting outfit underneath that resembled white oilskin. So oilskin is a type of water resistant fabric that in those days was made by painting cloth with a mixture of wax and oil, and
Okay.
they made, sort of raincoats out of it. Sailors would wear them when there would be inclement weather and things like that. So that's how she described.
But his was skin tight.
His was tight and and white. He then grabbed her and began tearing at her gown with his claws, which she said she was certain that they were made of some kind of metal.
Okay.
And she managed to scream and then fight to get away from him and run back to the house. He managed to grab her on the steps as she was trying to run into the house, and he slashed her neck and arms.
Okay.
Which, not great.
Yeah.
But her sister, who was inside of the house, had heard her screaming and ran out and managed to scare the attacker off, and he fled.
But before she was... so she didn't die from these injuries?
No, she did not. 9 days after the incident with Jane, 18-year-old Lucy Scales and her sister had just visited their brother, a butcher, which... not important information. Just thought it was kind of, I don't know. You don't hear about butchers that much these days.
Yeah,
I mean, you heard about butchers a lot more back in the day. But
well, it used to be a lot of the butchers.
Yeah. So they had, Lucy and her sister had just visited their brother and had just left his place to return home. They walked down Green Dragon Alley. And
sounds like a dangerous place to be walking down.
And as they did so, they observed a person standing ahead of them. Lucy was walking in front of her sister, and as she approached the individual, she noticed that they were wearing a large cloak. Suddenly, this person unleashed a burst of blue flame at her face, which caused her to temporarily lose sight, and obviously caused her intense distress.
Yeah, she took her eyebrows off too.
Yeah, she was completely overwhelmed by fear and collapsed, and then ended up kind of going into seizures.
Okay. I mean, I assume any lady in the early 1800s in England fainted very easily at the sight of something frightening like this.
They had the tight corsets, so they couldn't get
exactly.
Very much
They
oxygen.
were, yeah.
So the attacker then just kind of fled the scene.
Yeah. He was like, "Yeah, if you're gonna make a big deal about it, forget it. It's just a prank, lady.
Just a horrible prank." Her brother stated that he had heard the screams of one of his sisters, so they were close enough to his house that he could hear them.
So less than a block away, probably.
Maybe, yeah. And so he ran down Green Dragon Alley to find Lucy on the ground in a fit, with her sister attempting to hold and support her. And together they took Lucy home. Lucy's sister, the one who had witnessed this attack, said that he was a tall, thin, and gentlemanly looking person.
Okay, so no helmet this time, it would seem.
No mention of a helmet this time. But he was wearing a large cloak, and she said he carried a small lamp, which was similar to the kind that police would carry in those days. And at the time, the police questioned several people, but they were all set free. So we are no further on this manhunt.
Right. To the truth of what's going on here.
Who is this? Is it a person? Is it something paranormal?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Man, it kind of sounds like a Victorian Iron Man suit in some ways.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. With some Wolverine claws for character.
So by this point, news of Spring-Heeled Jack was extremely widespread, and more incidents were being reported all across England and Scotland, lots in smaller towns and villages, varying little minor differences in the kinds of
like what people are
they would describe
seeing.
Him like almost like devil-like, that he had pointy features, like a pointy chin, pointy nose, but a lot of them did describe him as sort of this like skinny
wraith-like.
Yeah.
And
having this incredible ability to just like
Boing.
parkour, basically.
Yeah.
Which seemed completely unhuman
Right.
to them.
Nowadays, we would call that guy Moonshoes Jack. Mm-hmm. Nickelodeon Moonshoes Jack.
Yes. But also, I mean, as I was researching this, trying to imagine what it must look like. And we are used to seeing people, Cirque du Soleil doing like incredible feats of like athletic agility
and wearing stilts and wacky get-ups.
Right. So it was strange and rare for people in those days to see it, but like
but nowadays, if
seem
we go to
completely-
Cirque du Soleil, at least once a week, we see it all the time.
But so Spring Heel Jack became synonymous with the boogeyman. Essentially,
Never want to be synonymous with the boogeyman. It's bad for your public image.
right.
Unless you're trying to be a scary guy, which sounds like he might have been trying to do.
I think that was his number one goal.
Yeah.
Essentially, the similarity with the boogeyman was essentially the concept of using this quote monster to scare children
Right.
into behaving.
Yeah.
Right.
Spring Heel Jack will come get you if you don't eat all your carrots.
Yeah. Essentially, if you're not good, Spring Heel Jack is going to leap up to your window at night and snatch you.
Oh, yeah. Because probably some kids are like, I live on the second floor, mate.
Right.
You're not going to get me. The
And-
boogeyman can't get me. Well, Spring Heel Jack can.
Right. And the interesting thing about those the cases of those two separate cases of those teenage girls, Lucy and Jane, was, and especially in Jane's case, this happened, they weren't, walking alone at night.
Mm-hmm.
Jane was at home.
Right.
And this person came to the door and lured her outside to attack her. Whereas all of the other reports up until that point that that made the mayor make a statement was
like crimes of opportunity.
People walking alone at night.
Yeah.
Women in particular walking alone at
vulnerable
night.
looking women.
But I think the case of Jane sort of was a scary turn in the lore because it's like, oh, you're in the safety of your own home and he could still come.
Lots of women probably thought, well, I don't go out alone at night, so I'm safe. But, yeah. If somebody's coming knocking on your door, there's not too much he can do except for not answer the door, but he might jump up on your chimney or something and come in.
Didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Scary. So people were, this was like widespread. People were very spooked.
Right.
In later years, Spring Heel Jack became a popular character in Penny Dreadfuls, which were those weekly serialized stories. And this kind of happened in the later part of the 19th century, but Spring Heel Jack in those stories was originally depicted as a villain. As time went on, he gradually shifted into becoming more of a heroic persona.
Okay.
In fiction. By the early 1900s, he was depicted as a costumed figure who was dedicated to righting wrongs and saving the innocent.
Yeah, I'm looking at a cover of him on one of these Penny Dreadfuls. He looks like Batman.
He does look like an early Batman with wings and
he's like going after grave
helmet.
robbers, it looks like.
Essentially, he was described as a precursor to pulp fiction and subsequently comic book heroes.
Wow. Yeah, you can definitely see the influence there.
Yeah.
Also influenced the third wave ska band, Spring Heel Jack.
Oh, I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
Quite a
Quite a pedigree.
Let's talk theories.
Okay.
So because of the unnatural abilities that Spring Heel Jack had, many people think he is a paranormal entity because not only of the ability to leap very high and kind of flee quickly and be very agile.
Right, like superhuman agility.
Right. Also, the length of time that Spring-Heeled Jack.
Active and seen.
Yes.
I was going to say also, I think the fire eyes.
Fire
and the
eyes,
belching
breathing
fire,
in the mouth.
That also, yeah.
Those are also not normal
Not
human
normal things that might
characteristics.
lead you to think this might be some kind of paranormal entity.
But also because of like I said, the length of time, it's more than one individual could have been in shape to be sort of playing these quote pranks or,
Oh, so you're saying more than one person could have been doing this?
possibly.
Yeah.
But some people also think that he might have been an alien from outer space.
Oh, an alien from outer space. Okay.
One of those.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because of the glowing red eyes, the breath that was fire. They also believe that his ability to jump so high might have been because he came from a planet that had a lot stronger gravity. So he just like had the ability to jump higher.
Yeah. Or it could be the Earth's yellow sun. That was what allowed Superman to jump very high.
Oh, wow. Thank you for that information.
Because Superman couldn't fly initially. He could leap higher than a tall building. Yeah.
Maybe
and
Superman got some ideas from Spring-Heeled Jack.
Yeah, and he was from another planet.
Others think that he could have been a demon brought here by people practicing dark magic.
Oh, which was a thing in the 1800s.
Oh, yeah. Or even he appeared on his own just to stir up trouble.
Right. Yeah. Could have just been bored in hell.
Of course, there's also others who think that it could be mass hysteria, which...
Right.
Looking at some of the history leading up to the first incidents of Spring-Heeled Jack, there were some pretty widespread ghost stories.
Okay. And tales of mass hysteria.
Well, this...
Or that caused mass hysteria.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a ghost that was apparently 10 feet tall and had the ability to like jump over buildings and things like that.
That's too tall for a ghost.
No, is it?
Well, I mean,
Are there rules?
If a ghost is somebody who was previously a human being, a live human being, then...
I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a human being then.
A ghost of what? A ghost of an alien?
Maybe.
Yeah.
So this was sort of... People were already kind of primed for this kind of lore.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of belief in this kind of stuff was more commonplace.
Right.
You know, the world, we understood a lot less of the world than we do now.
Right.
Some people would argue we understand less than we did back then.
Wow.
But the believing in this kind of stuff did not label you a crazy person like it might today.
No. And yeah, many think that. So this was just sort of a mass hysteria event because if you look at the timeline of the first incident that happened, the very first incident I told you about with Mary Stevens, who was alone, the servant who was walking alone at night. And then the very next day, the creature jumped in front of the carriage.
Yeah.
That happened a couple of months before the mayor made these pretty big statements that got a lot of attention. And then less than a month later, the incidents with the two teenage girls, Jane and Lucy, came to light. So were they already thinking, obviously the police played a huge part in Jane's story of the policeman coming to her door saying we caught Spring-Heeled Jack. And so she's already very much thinking about, probably fearful about,
that she's about to come face to face with them.
Well, no, just fearful about being that this creature is running wild in London and she's, frightened of it and knows that the police are out looking for him.
Yeah.
So like, is that just her knowing that was going on? Did that play a part in just sort of her feeding into the hysteria?
Well, I was going to say, I imagine that this is 1800s London, not the safest place and time in history, and there probably were a whole bunch of attacks on women walking alone.
Right.
And you just need a few of those people, understandably in a terrified state while that's happening, and if they get away, not even intentionally exaggerating the other person's strength, how fast they were,
Right.
Because those kinds of attacks happen very suddenly,
Right.
To begin with,
Right.
and I was thinking that even with the guy in the alley, that could have just been like a really weird looking guy lighting up a cigarette, but these sisters were already so
Yes.
How often does that happen where you're a kid and you're playing around with the Ouija boards or whatever, and then later on that night something falls off the
Right.
cabinet, you jump through the roof because
Yes.
you're already primed.
Totally. So there are a couple of potential suspects,
Okay.
but sort of, okay, I'll get to that. But yeah, there are a couple of potential suspects. So if we go with the belief that this was some guy running around playing pranks.
Yeah.
There's
with some kind of suit.
Yes. And just sort of like was really agile and could, parkour, like I said. A man named Thomas Milbank, who immediately after the attack on Jane was the one that was at home with the knock, that there was a knock on the door, that the police officer came to the door and lured her outside. But wasn't actually a police officer.
Yeah.
So immediately after that attack, he boasted at the pub called Morgan's Arms that he was Spring-Heeled Jack.
Okay.
He was then arrested and put on trial.
Well, that backfired.
He had been wearing white overalls and a great coat. So
a big coat.
Could look like a lot like the cloak and the oilskin that she described seeing. And the candle that he had dropped was found. But he was not convicted because Jane insisted that her attacker was breathing fire, and Thomas was like, "Oh yeah, no, I can't. I can't do that. I don't have the ability to do that." So he
Hopefully this wasn't like a OJ trial situation where they then tried to have him breathe fire during the case and just couldn't do it.
So he was let go. Another
It sounds like they didn't have much on him to begin with, other than
him saying drunkenly at the pub that he was
after maybe somebody was like, "Look how you're dressed. You look like Spring-Heeled Jack." And he goes, "I'm Spring-Heeled Jack."
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Right. Then another potential suspect was the Marquis of Waterford.
You always gotta keep an eye out for those marquees.
An Irish nobleman who was often in the newspapers in the late 1830s for his rowdy behavior. He played pranks. He would vandalize, and he had the nickname the Mad Marquis.
Okay, that's a pretty cool nickname.
Because of his erratic actions and disrespect towards women.
Wow.
So he was it's apparently known that he was in London at the time of the very first Spring-Heeled Jack sightings or incidents as well. But ultimately there was never a trial for him. There was never any concrete evidence. It was just like
evidence.
Right. It's like, oh, this guy's known for being a prankster. He would
and he would have the resources to make spring-heeled shoes and claws.
Yeah. So he was, in the late 1800s, he was named sort of the most likely culprit by experts on the subject, but they then thought maybe he kind of started it, but then others copycats happen. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Sounds like that's probably like the most likely thing that happened, although I don't know that totally explains the whole fiery eyes, fire breathing thing, but it sounds
like she was really hell-bent on like, nope, I didn't make that aspect of it up.
So ultimately today, still completely unsolved mystery.
Wow.
We don't know who it was, what it was, and if he's still out there, if he's a paranormal being.
I was going to say, do you know if there have been any recent sightings of the Spring-Heeled Jack?
In 2012.
Okay, so not too long ago.
Yeah. there was a family that was traveling home by taxi.
Mm-hmm.
They saw a mysterious dark figure.
Okay.
And it darted across the road in front of them and managed to leap away at impossible heights.
Okay.
So that was the most recent sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack.
Okay. So he's laying low. He's
laying low. He's not doing
200 years old. He's slowed down a lot.
He's not doing any, very confrontational attacks on anyone.
Well, that's
here,
good.
But
maybe somebody finally got through to him.
Maybe.
And we're like, just jumping real high is cool enough, Jack. You don't have to try and rip people with your claws.
I do think it's just so crazy that he ended up becoming like a hero in fiction. Like he was terrorizing people and frightening people for decades, and then became like, no, he's a good guy saving everybody.
Yeah, because that didn't really happen with characters like Dracula, like vampire. I mean, there's Blade, there's a couple of like hero vampires out there, but yeah, this guy seems like he really took a turn to being an idea similar to a Batman, a guy that's out there scaring the criminals,
right,
turning fear against them, and looking out for the little guy.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that was only in fictional accounts. Nobody has a story of like, I was being mugged and Spring-Heeled Jack zipped down and saved me.
Not that we know of.
And told me, keep this to yourself, citizen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The fire stuff is definitely strange and reminds me a little bit of Bigfoot sightings, things like that, or cryptid sightings in general, where sometimes there are sightings of things that don't make any kind of sense of something that exists in our physical reality, but people swear they saw it.
Yeah, right. And that not every reported sighting is entirely the same.
Right.
Like his physical appearance was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Sometimes he had a helmet. Could just be some real...
some bored marquee running around.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, I think that's it for this week. I want to hear something weird. Certainly weird. Spring-Heeled Jack, put him in the weird column.
He is definitely in the weird column.
Sorry, but you're acting weird. You're going to get put in the weird column, Jack.
With us, apparently. Weird people. The
weirdos. If you would like to follow us on social media and YouTube and TikTok, all that kind of stuff, find us at Wanna Hear Pod on all those places. And if you're in the mood to give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, 5-star reviews help people find the show. We really appreciate them. Laura, any parting words?
Don't walk down dark alleys at night.
Especially if they're named after dragons.
Yes.
There you go.
There's your lesson.
There's the lesson from Spring-Heeled Jack. We'll see you next week, guys.
Thanks for listening. Want to Hear Something Weird is a Clamor audio production, distributed by the Cloud 10 Network. Hosted and executive produced by Tom Reynolds and me, Laura Anderson. Executive produced by Aaron Hilliard.
Clamor General Manager Rich Statter. Associate Producer Ethan Aronson. Post-production supervised by Devin Ruskin. Production Assistant Samara Mullick. Special thanks to Sim Sarna and Saiba Krieger at Cloud 10.
Seeking the truth never gets old. Introducing June's Journey, the free-to-play mobile game that will immerse you in a thrilling murder mystery. Join June Parker as she uncovers hidden objects and clues to solve her sister's death in a beautifully illustrated world set in the Roaring '20s. With new chapters added every week, the excitement never ends. Download June's Journey now on your Android or iOS device, or play on PC through Facebook Games.